Well, we're discussing marijuana use in Canada and asking if we should legalize it. Here's what the studio audience feels. Would you support the legalization of marijuana? 53% said yes, 47% said no, and that's pretty typical of the Canadian public opinion on this. So we're back with two men, both who work with young people addicted to drugs. Brian O'Day, former marijuana smuggler, the author of High, Confessions of a Pot Smuggler, and George Glover, the CEO of Teen Challenge Canada, the world's largest and oldest faith-based drug rehab program. And it's great putting you beside each other because, Brian, you came out in the first segment and said you want to see all drugs legalized right across the board. George, what's your opinion?
Well, we're opposed to it, Lorna, and I think the reason for us is because we've done surveys on our clients, our students in our programs. There was one done at 218 locations of our U.S. locations, and 72% of our clients said no, it should never be legalized. 4
former mayors have publicly shown support for the position of the Stop the Violence Coalition BC. Just recently stated that marijuana prohibition is without question a failed policy. It's creating violent, gang-related crime in our communities, fear among our citizens. It's adding financial costs at all levels. Brian, what do you say about the mayors in Vancouver pushing for legalization?
Look, nobody ever got elected by saying send less people to prison and legalizing drugs. So it's a huge chance. Only based on the facts, it hasn't worked the way we have done it. If it worked, we wouldn't have been building more prisons and locking more people up. I went to a prison that was built for 400 and there were 1,300 of us in it. We keep building more structures, piling more people on top of more people because the drug laws have not worked. So we've been making a mistake. And as I love to say, unless we're prepared to make a new mistake, we will never get it right.
Okay, George, you have people piled up on top of people to get into Teen Challenge over drug recovery. It's a wonderful rehab program. What are the facts about why people can't handle legalized marijuana?
They're medicating their pain any way they can, and our statistics tell us that from our clientele that are in our programs, whether in Canada, the U.S., 1,100 locations around the world, 93 countries of Teen Challenge, that it's a gateway drug. That's what they're saying. And that when they're done with the marijuana, they're going on to harder drugs. And unequivocally, our clientele are saying absolutely not, should not be criminalized, should not be legalized. And they're just absolutely not in favor of it.
What you two do agree on is you're both in schools speaking to young people about drug use. Brian, what are teens telling you about their use of marijuana?
Teens are very reluctant to talk about their use of marijuana unless they're in treatment. I've noticed that. Teens talk to me about other issues in their life, and I can gather pretty much from a conversation if someone's using or not. Look, I think it's horrible that kids end up in recovery, that they have to go through that in their lives. It's the worst possible thing. Well, recovery is the best possible thing, but what gets them to recovery is a horrible experience. The fact, and so I know that George realizes that all of these people that end up in his recovery centers are in there having done something illegal. Illegal. It's
George,
not legal.
Would it make it any different if it was legal? Would those lives be any different if it was legal?
Well, we don't think so. And I think the clientele in our programs feel the same way. That's what I'm sensing.
Okay, I got to ask you this, because we're going to bring marijuana in, but you each have two different responses to addiction recovery. George, why do people need God? And Brian, I want you to tell us why they don't need God for recovery.
Oh,
George.
I've never said that they didn't need God, but go ahead.
Well, it's a good question, Lorna. Yeah, our approach is that many of our clientele go to secular drug rehab programs. Sometimes our clientele have been to 2, 3, 4, 5 different treatment programs and have failed miserably. And the studies show that people that come to Teen Challenge, over 70% of the clientele that go through the program remain clean and drug-free. Dr. Catherine Hess, that conducted one of the first surveys on Teen Challenge, found that Teen Challenge had many of the same things to offer that secular rehabs had to offer. But she went on camera and she said the one thing that stood out about Teen Challenge was what she called the Jesus factor. And we just believe, really, and many of our clients, our graduates, alumni around the world say that really it was the spiritual component of the program that gave me the permanent freedom from the psychological bondage to abuse substances.
Okay, Brian, I want you to weigh in on your opinion on that, because you've been there with and without the Jesus factor.
I have. I found a 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I can bust my own anonymity, to be extremely spiritual. And without that component of the program, I simply would not have gotten it. Simple as that. Now, you have a name for the spiritual program that you follow, Jesus Christ, and good for you. And I have absolutely, I have no problem with that whatsoever. That works for you. It doesn't work. Look, what I found most of the time, people coming into AA had a big problem with the word God. Mm-hmm. They do. They have a tremendous problem with the word God. And God's a big part of our program, a God of our understanding. And once I can climb, I just knew when I got there that I certainly wasn't the greatest power in the world, and that there is a power greater than I. And so that started an inquiry in me where once I thought I had answers. And that inquiry has been something that I've pursued from that day to this. And through that inquiry, I've been able to put together 25 years now of living clean and sober. So
I want to thank you both for working with teenagers on educating this. You come at it different ways. Your aim is the same, and obviously if we've got half of our kids have tried pot, we got to keep having these conversations.
Absolutely.
we do. Thank you for having it.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to find out what you think about another question here at Context. Do you think recreational marijuana usage is safe? Yes or no? Send us your answers by email, Facebook, or Twitter, and the studio audience is going to take a live vote on that, and we'll have those results in a moment. Coming up, a former marijuana user who now works with helping others suffering from addiction. She's going to tell us her views on marijuana legalization and her own journey out. All right, we asked the studio audience if they thought marijuana usage was safe. Here's how they voted. 27% said yes, 73% said no. Well, we're joined now by Fiona MacDonald. She knows a little bit about marijuana usage. She is a graduate of an addiction program, Teen Challenge, and she now works at the Windsor Life Center, helping women who suffer with drug addiction. Let's welcome Fiona to Context. Fiona, thank you very much. Hey, this must be a fascinating conversation for a worker dealing with the end result of drug liberalization. People who used it without caution. Should it be legalized or not?
You know what, there's been valid points on both sides, but I think end result, absolutely not. I don't think it should be legalized. It's a gateway drug, and there's harmful effects to your health and long-term consequences that come along with it.
You have an interesting story that began with marijuana use. How did you first start being a smoker?
I was in junior high out in Alberta, and the opportunity arose, and so I took it. And right off the hop, I liked it. I went
from grade 7, weren't you? Grade 7 or 8?
Grade 7 or 8, right around there. Grade 7 or 8, I don't know which grade, yeah. But right around there, so I was about 13. And the opportunity arose, and I picked it up, and I ran with it.
How does the opportunity arise for a grade 7er? Sorry.
You know what? It's available. It is available. And more available than we'd like to say, most definitely, but I don't think the legalization of it would cut that down in any way, shape, or form. Alcohol's available to kids that age as well.
You went from marijuana to becoming addicted to crack. How? How did that happen?
Weed is a gateway drug, and I think if you pick up a substance such as weed, and you begin to smoke it, your tolerance rises along with it. Your usage rises, your tolerance rises, and again, it's not doing what it did or what you wanted it to do in the beginning, what it did in the beginning. And so you reach for something a little bit stronger, and as opportunities arise, you I guess you graduate from one to the next, and it's never a plan. You pick up a joint and think, I'm going to become a crackhead or a needle user someday. I went from a straight A student, just from smoking weed, to dropping out of school. That was before I picked up anything hard. It took my motivation and my priorities. I loved school, I had a social life, I was in sports, but I picked up that marijuana and I loved it more than anything.
How much weed were you smoking as a junior high school student?
As much as I could get my hands on, really. Definitely every day, and that was my driving force once I had picked it up. It was kind of the solution. It was my escape. It's exactly what I was looking for, and once I found it, I knew that's what I wanted. And so priorities, energy, thought, that it was all on my next high. Yeah.
Overcoming addictions becomes your personal focus. How did you overcome your own addiction? What happened?
Jesus Christ. Solely Jesus Christ. And you know what? Actually, I was incarcerated. And we go back to people being labelized with the criminal label if they've been caught with substance in their pocket or whatever. And I had that. But it was ultimately being in a jail cell, handed a Bible while I was in that jail cell, and realizing that there was a God.
Well, you know, I have talked to so many people who are handed a Bible in a jail cell.
Yeah.
And that's it? That's the beginning for you?
That was the beginning for me. I realized that there was somebody that loved me far greater than anybody that was in my life, and the thing that I was leaning on the most, which was my substance abuse, and that I didn't need to live like this anymore, that there was a plan and a purpose for my life, and I definitely wasn't living it in the bondage I was living in. And so I don't think I found God, but God found me in that jail cell and led me right out of it, definitely.
So when you hear, don't throw marijuana users, drug addicts into jail, what would you say?
Well, I'm not saying everybody's going to find God in jail if they're arrested for having a joint in their pocket, not necessarily, but I don't think there needs to be legal consequences and ramifications for things like this. I really do believe that.
Did your rescue by God stick in your life? Did it last?
Absolutely. That's why I'm sitting here right now. That's why my son's in the audience and my mother. All of those things I had handed away. I had turned over to my addiction. Nothing meant anything to me in my life. And then Jesus opened my eyes and set me free, broke those chains off, and well, I live to tell those who are still in the bondage about the freedom in Christ that they can have.
How are you doing that now at work? What's happening?
I've been blessed with a position in a new ministry called Windsor Life Center, and I'm program coordinator there, and it just blows my mind the blessings that the Lord has placed in my life. I get to, well, our doors haven't opened. They're opening February 15th, and we'll have women coming in the same shape that I was in when I walked through the doors of Teen Challenge, actually. And people looked at me with love in their eyes and with hope, expectant hope to see what God would do in my life, and I get to do the same in turn with these women that'll walk through our doors, so it's a pretty exciting venture.
We're going to put more on our website about the Windsor Life Center and about the Teen Challenge Centers across Canada.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, after the break, my thoughts on the marijuana debate. Stay with us. That was great.
Thank you.